Hello, 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 and welcome to Radical Disruption. I feel like it has been an eternity since I recorded a podcast episode. I always batch record, so I usually do at least a month in advance when I sit down to record. And within the last month, I think it's been about a month, maybe even a month and a half since I last recorded, so much has happened. I'm going to give you a quick, super brief recap just so that you're keeping up with what's going on. So I went to El Salvador and we did our baby moon there. So my husband and I, we went there for a week. It was amazing, 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 amazing. It was like 90 degrees, and then we came back. I think we came back and it was like 19 degrees in Utah, and there was snow on the ground, and I was like, oh no! But El Salvador was amazing. If you ever want to go there and you need recommendations, reach out to me. I would be more than happy to share. We had a great experience surfing and going to waterfall hikes that were just like the most beautiful waterfalls we've ever seen, and we've seen a lot of waterfalls. And surfing, well, I didn't surf. Gabe surfed. We had really great food. I don't remember if I said that already, pregnancy brain, but that was amazing. And what else has happened? Well, the day that we came back from El Salvador, we closed on our house. Everything went smoothly with that, and then we basically just started packing up our house right after that, and we moved. I think it was like maybe a week after we got back from our trip and closed on our house and everything, we moved to Idaho. So we were in Utah, now we're living in Idaho, and we were fully unpacked, moved into our house here in Idaho, and we're so excited to be here. We're on a few acres of land. We're eventually going to have some cows and some chickens, and it's just a way slower pace of life, closer to family here. I actually grew up in Idaho, so that's a huge reason why we also moved back. Of course, family, of course, land as well. So we're very excited, and I also just crossed last week halfway in my pregnancy, so we're on the downhill slope now, which is always exciting. And I think that's it for big updates. That's a lot of updates all at once, but all that being said, let's dive into the episode. So if you have been around for any amount of time listening to this podcast or consuming my content on Instagram, or maybe you're on my email list, or bonus points if you're doing all three of those things, you are a true fan and I love you, then you know how important it is for your audience, or how important it is, for your audience, both followers and non-followers, to spend as much time on your content as possible. In terms of how the algorithm works, the more time that people spend on your content, the higher that piece of content is going to rank in the algorithm, meaning that it's going to be pushed out to even more people, which is going to help you increase views and reach and hopefully followers as well. And why is that? It's because it signals to the algorithm that people really like that piece of content because they're spending more time on it than the average piece of content or other pieces of content that are out there in like the Instagram space at that time. For Reels, this looks like having a really high watch time, but not just having a high watch time, but also having a high completion rate, meaning that people are not just watching those first 1, 2, 3 seconds, but the entire reel from start to finish. And for carousels, this isn't in your data, like you can't see in your analytics inside of Instagram for carousel posts how much time people are spending on your content. I see that as being a future update that they add probably years from now, knowing Instagram and how they never like to give us anything that's actually helpful. So again, future update, but what this would look like though is getting people to not just swipe through your first maybe 1 or 2 slides of that carousel post, but getting them to swipe all the way to the end of it, reading to the bottom of your caption and engaging with the post. Those are all things that are really, really important and all basically signals. Again, you're not going to see that in your insights necessarily, but they're all signals that people are spending more time on that piece of content. And so you can almost use like context clues to see if people are spending time on that piece of content or if they're not. Again, Reels, it's a little bit more straightforward. You are going to be able to see in your insights watch time. Oftentimes you can see replays. Sometimes that insight for me comes and goes depending on, I guess, if Instagram is updating or not. I have had replays though several times, and that's just really helpful to know that not only are people watching it from start to finish, but they are replaying that multiple times, which is a really good signal to me in terms of my content and if I'm going to repurpose that or, just strategizing for content moving forward. But it's also a great signal to the algorithm because again, if people are willing to watch that multiple times, it's a really great piece of content. Now, I'm going to share with you 5 ways to keep people on your content longer. Note, though, this is really, really important. This is not about getting people to watch those first few seconds or consume the first slide of your post, that is an entirely different strategy. That is talking about capturing attention. What I'm going to be talking about is holding attention. So what happens after you actually capture the attention through your hooks and whatever it is that you're doing on your piece of content? Once that attention has been captured, how are you going to hold that attention so that way you can utilize that watch time benefit through the algorithm? 5 ways. Let's talk about the very first one here. You're going to create an open loop so that people want to stick around for the resolution. So you want to start off your post with an intriguing hook, and I'm not going to talk about hooks in here, but start off with an intriguing hook, but then don't reveal the answer until the end of whatever your piece of content is, whether that's a reel or a carousel. So that way people stick around to the end because they're like, well, in the hook, he or she promised that XYZ was going to be shared, so I want to stick around until that thing is shared, right? But to take this one step further, though, what I see a lot of times is people will just drag it out. They're just like going on and on and on and on. And then, their post is actually just like this muddled like mess of muddiness because they're like, oh, well, I need to just drag this on instead of just getting to the point. So you can't just drag out giving them the answer and expect people to stick around because they're not going to stick around, right? You need to make it engaging between the hook and then giving them whatever the answer is, right? Now, a few ways that you can do this. Number one, storytelling. Tell a story either from your own personal life or maybe it's a client or even just using an analogy that ties into the topic. You're going to have that hook, then you're going to tell whatever that story is, make it really engaging. People love stories, people connect with stories, and then at the end, you're going to share whatever that solution is. Another option here is you're going to talk about why the topic is important, because then people are going to care a lot more about whatever your solution is that you present at the end. Because when you say, hey, this is why I'm talking about this. This is why it's important to you. This is why this solution is better than other alternative solutions on the market. When you present that solution now, they're like, oh, it means so much more. They're actually connected to that solution versus it just being like a tip that you shared, right? So there's a lot more connection to it. So let me repeat that tip there. You're going to create an open loop so that people want to stick around, but you're not going to drag it on and on and on. You still want to be concise and you want to be clear and you want to get to the point as quickly as possible, but you are going to almost leave it a little bit mysterious in the in-between of the hook and giving the solution so that people are like, it's almost like building. You're like, oh, okay, that's important. I understand why that's important. Or you're telling a story and they're like, oh yes, this is good, this is good, this is good. And then you share the solution and they're like, oh, and it clicks so much more for them. And in the process of doing that, it's sneaky because you are going to be boosting your posts standing in the algorithm, right? Which means more reach, which means more impact, which means more followers. Number 2, you're going to make your content visually engaging. For reels, this looks like quick cuts. So if you have a longer reel, thinking about clips that are 5 to 15 seconds, and don't do longer than 5 to 15 seconds because then it's too long, right? You want to have these quick cuts. And if you have a shorter reel, thinking like 3 to 7 second clips. And if it's longer than that, you just want to clip it up, cut it up, I think would probably be the better word. Other ways that you can do this on reels is zooming in and out with your camera. You can actually hold your phone and move your hand, or you can use CapCut or InShot. There's effects that you can use, tools inside of those editing tools that allow you to just zoom in and out. Good lighting is also visually engaging. Captions if you're doing a talking reel, so that way people who are listening with the sound off are still engaged by that post. So lots of different things that you can do there to make that content visually appealing for a reel. Now on the carousel, on the other hand, this looks like keeping people reading with arrows, or you often see sometimes on my content, actually most of the time, I don't think there's a lot of carousel posts where I haven't done this. It'll say keep swiping, where there'll be an arrow and then it'll show you how many slides there are. So it'll say you're on slide 3 out of 8. That's going to keep people wanting to continue because they're like, oh, I'm on slide 3 out of 8. Well, I wonder what, slides 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are talking about. Also using bold headlines, subtitles, and paragraph fonts to make it really easy to read and also visually appealing too. When you look at a post and everything is the same exact font size and there's a bunch of text there and nothing really stands out, it's hard for people to skim. And so it's going to make it way more visually appealing and easier for people to consume, especially those skimmers, which I would say majority of us are, unless it's like a really, really, really engaging post. Having the headline or the title, the subtitle, and then the paragraph font, or even just using a bold or an italic font where those certain words or phrases are going to stand out as we're swiping through that carousel post, it's going to make things easier for us to consume, which is going to make it easier for us to consume the whole entire post versus just the first few slides. Number 3 is pattern interruption throughout the post. This can look like using visuals that pop up. You see this oftentimes. I'll do this in my reels, especially my talking reels. I might have an example of a direct message automation pop up if I'm talking about DM automation, or I might have an example of a carousel post pop up, one that's done really well, or I might even have a screenshot of what does my revenue look like over the last week if I'm talking about that. But whatever it is, you want it to be supportive of the topic. So it's not just people hearing you talk about it or reading about you talking about it, right? If it's a carousel post, but they're actually going to visually be able to see what it is that you're talking about. So thinking about visuals that support the topic of your post. And it might not make sense for you to be doing screenshots of your revenue, which is totally fine, but you might have a client that, dropped 20 pounds. Well, maybe you have a visual of their chart. Maybe you're charting their weight or something, and they could see how your audience can see how over time they dropped weight. Or maybe you are talking about hormones and maybe someone got their blood tested and you want to show basically I don't even know what that's called, but a blood test, the analysis that you get after the blood test. You could show that on there as an example of what to look for, or this is a good hormone level, or this is a bad hormone level, something along those lines. Again, I'm not an expert in hormones, but I'm just trying to throw out examples there. But to give you even more examples on Reels, you might have a graph or a before and after picture, or maybe even a recipe pop up just for even just a few seconds. That's going to help, again, interrupt the pattern throughout the reel. Now, we're not talking about those first few seconds. We're talking about throughout the reel, throughout the carousel post, having these things pop up. So it's not just the same monotony over and over and over again, where, if someone's going through a carousel post, they're going to see text on a slide, text on a slide, text on a slide, text on a slide, right? If you do text on a slide, text on a slide, visual, they're like, oh, that breaks things up for them. That's a pattern interruption. Now, if someone is watching a reel, whether that be a B-roll type of reel, or even a talking reel, if you have a graph that pops up, or maybe it's a before and after picture, it's a pattern interrupt, and it's going to keep people engaged. Now, other pattern interrupts outside of the examples that I just gave you, which were plenty of examples, but if you need more, it could be your tone of voice. Are you quiet? Or are you speaking really loud? And I'm not going to yell just in case you are listening with the sound up a little bit more. Don't want to break your eardrums or bust your speakers or something. It could be different colors, the clothing that you're wearing. It could be text popping up. So maybe you're on a talking reel, or you're doing a talking reel. You've probably seen this though on other people's talking reels where they have the captions and the captions are running, but they'll have certain words that they're almost pulling out that are more important, and they'll have those bold and they'll just pop up for a few seconds. That's a really great pattern interrupt. You could have a video tutorial in the middle of your talking reel, or even in the middle of your B-roll. That would be kind of cool to throw that in there. You could throw in a GIF or even a meme. Could even be something that would do a pattern interrupt. You could do that in a carousel. You could even throw in a meme inside of your reel, or really just any other unexpected element that's still supportive of the topic of the post. And that is the key. You don't want to just throw in a pattern interrupt just to throw in a pattern interrupt, because if it's not supportive of the topic, people are going to be like, why did she just throw that in there? That doesn't make any sense, right? And that's probably going to get people to swipe away and not keep swiping through or keep watching. So it needs to be supportive of the topic of the post. In some posts, you're like, I don't really have any ideas for a good pattern interrupt, and that's okay. But I would say majority of the time, you can come up with some sort of pattern interrupt inside of that post. You just have to get a little bit more creative there. And again, like I was saying, it could be text popping up. It doesn't always have to be this visual with a graph or a before and after that pops up there to still utilize that pattern interrupt technique. Number 4 is you're going to lead people to your caption. If you can provide value in your caption, or even tell a story in your caption, or continue some sort of conversation from your post, and people are spending time reading that caption, then they're spending more time on your post. You will often see me in my content provide information in the post or the value or tell a story in the post, and I'll say at the end of that post, whether it's a carousel or whether it's a reel, see the caption for more. Or even sometimes I'll have my caption, the very first line of my caption will say more below, or read for more tips on XYZ topic. And so that way people are wanting to continue the conversation in the caption with me. Now, the key with this strategy working is that people have to be engaged by the post, meaning that they were drawn in already from those first few seconds or the first, few slides. Because if they weren't, then they're definitely not reading your caption, right? And so it doesn't matter if you refer people to your caption if they're not getting, if you're not capturing their attention initially. So you have to capture their attention first in order to be able to implement these capture holding attention strategies, I guess is the word that I'm looking for, because those two things play hand in hand. You can't just have these strategies of holding attention and not implement the strategies of capturing attention, because you have to capture attention before you can hold it. So just know that if you're like, hey, I'm utilizing all these tips here, even this caption tip where you're saying read the caption for more, but if you're not initially engaging them, then they're not reading the caption. It doesn't matter how great your caption is, how long your caption is, how short your caption is. It doesn't matter how many great call to action statements you have in your caption. They are not reading your caption. So you need to initially engage them. And then once they're initially engaged, we can utilize these capture holding strategies, holding attention strategies. I need to come up with a better phrase for that, to boost your post in the algorithm. All right, 5, and finally here, is keep it concise. And I know that sounds like a duh, but I can't tell you how many pieces of content I look at, whether that's a carousel or a reel, where I'm like, wow, that could have been said in half the amount of time, or half the amount of words, or half the amount of slides. As business owners, and I get this, I'm an overeducator. I love giving all the details. I want to explain all the things, but as business owners, we want so badly to teach and give away everything and make sure that someone gets all the information that they need in one post. But the truth is, that hurts not only the post, but also the consumer more than it helps, because no one can include it all in one post. And if you can, please reach out to me and let me know how you're doing that. If you can include everything that you need to teach someone in order to get to their transformation, again, please reach out to me. No one can do that, okay? And when you try to pack it all in, your post becomes really complicated and messy. So people are going to tune out instead of consuming it from start to finish. So my challenge for you is, when you go to write a carousel or a reel script, or even just the text that you're putting on a B-roll, asking yourself, can I write this in half the amount of characters? Most of the time you can, with a little bit of reworking, and you'll quickly realize how much unneeded information you add in there. Of course, sometimes you're going to ask yourself that question and it's as concise as it can possibly be, and that's fantastic. But really making sure you are asking yourself that question, because it does and should be concise, especially if you're looking to not just capture attention, but hold attention. Now, for reels, if you're doing a face to camera talking reel, asking yourself if you're getting to the point quickly enough, and if you're adding in unnecessary fluff. I had a talking reel that I did for a brand partnership recently, where I actually went in and I cut off 20 seconds of the final reel just by asking myself that question. I was like, am I getting to the point quickly enough? And I was watching through and I was like, wow, that took me like 40 seconds to get to the point when I only needed 20 seconds to get to the point. And so that was a really powerful thing. And shortening it down and cutting out that fluff and keeping it more concise is going to keep that piece of content more fast paced, which is going to hold attention, right? And you can always ask ChatGPT too this question as well, and have it help you narrow down things. If you're like, I'm not really sure if it could be more concise, or maybe you're thinking, I think this can be more concise, but I don't know how to say it. Ask ChatGPT. I do that all the time, especially with my reel scripts. I do that sometimes with my carousel post text, but I would say more so with my reel scripts, just to really make sure that that script is keeping things fast paced. And of course, also implementing all the things that I just shared here too. But my homework for you from this episode is to take one of these strategies, key piece being one, I didn't say all of them, implement one of these strategies on your next post and let me know how it does.